Well, hello. It's just me today, and it's Tuesday, July 7th, 2026. And I'd like to talk about the news, primarily non-confidential networking. Struck me as the most interesting story today. Non-confidential computing, I should say. Confidential computing, I think, gained a lot of prominence because Apple announced, I'm pretty sure it's the technology Apple explained they were going to use put AI on your phone. They were going to use special confidential containers on the servers. And it turns out that this technology is not really ready for prime time. It rests on a mechanism called remote attestation, in which a server cryptographically proves to a client that it is running inside a genuine, unmodified, trusted execution environment before you send up any sensitive data. However, researchers have found attacks against the two state-of-the-art tested protocols. And the problem is, even though you can prove during the TLS handshake that the server is in a trusted environment, you cannot detect if it then switches to a different location, different server later. Um, the best fix available today proves a client is talking to the right machine at the start of a handshake, but it cannot prove that the data sent minutes later is still going to that same machine. So this bizarre idea that you can remotely be sure that a server is running in a secure environment seems to be quite weak. So that's a thing to be aware of. There is a file system used in embedded devices called FATFS. And it's a file system library that lets the device read and write FAT and exFAT formats on things like USB drives and SD cards. It's nearly everywhere. It runs in the firmware that runs security cameras, drones, industrial controllers, hardware, crypto wallets, and many other devices. However, on the worst affected systems, an attacker who gets a booby-trapped USB drive, SD card, or update file onto a device can corrupt the memory and run their own code. So it's maintained by one developer, and Run Zero, who found this vulnerability, tried repeatedly to reach the maintainer and even looped in Japan's CERT and was unable to get any response. So this is yet another example of the famous XKCD cartoon where something super important rests on one tiny little thing that's maintained by one guy that is totally unpaid and abandoned and probably lost interest years ago. So if there continues to be no response, the typical solution is some large company like Google or Microsoft will have to adopt this product and pay to update it. But it probably means that a whole lot of devices are vulnerable, and it would seem to me like the obvious thing to attack would be hardware crypto wallets. If you can figure out how to trick people into putting on a bogus update, which probably wouldn't be that easy. Anyway, um, all right, Apple has a feature called Hide My Email. It's part of Apple's paid iCloud Plus product, which I've never used, but anyway, it lets you generate an anonymous email address, which you can then use to sign up for things, which is a good idea. So you can avoid the spam. But the problem is there is some uh, way to get your real email address from that temporary email address. And Apple was informed of this a year ago, and they claimed to have fixed it, but they did not, and they no longer reply to inquiries about it. So it appears that those anonymous email addresses are not as anonymous as they should be, although this article doesn't give you exact details how to get the real address from it. Apparently, there is a way. There's an Android security setting called network notifications that will warn you if you're connecting to an insecure network. Two types. If you're connecting to an unencrypted Wi-Fi network, it will warn you. And if a network sends requests to harvest your unique device or SIM ID, it will warn you that somebody is doing that, spying on you with one of those interception towers that the police use for cell phone calls. So that sounds useful, a feature you can turn on. Although unencrypted Wi-Fi is really quite common, but I guess you should know when you're using it. That makes sense. Um, it's just, I think of it as much less of a risk than I used to because almost all higher level protocols have a layer of encryption anyway. But it does expose you to some risks. People can get in the middle, although usually they can't do anything in the middle if you're using something like HTTPS. All right. And here's another issue. Um, and you start logging things and you set up a central logging system like Splunk and you start forwarding all your logs to it, it can turn out to be very expensive to have all that log data going up. And it can slow down your threat researchers as they try to investigate incidents and they have to wade through a huge pile of irrelevant logs. So the flood of low value telemetry makes it harder for analysts to see what actively mattered. So a CISO at one company used AI to filter what data truly belonged in the security information and event monitoring platform, and they managed to reduce it by over 80%, saving a lot of money without by removing all the unnecessary data. So that's an interesting issue to think about. Windows, you back in the days of Windows XP, around Service Pack 2, Microsoft came up with something called Windows Genuine Advantage, which was an advantage to Microsoft, although not to the user, which would then detect if your machine was using the same product key as another machine. So in order to do that, Microsoft had to develop a way to make a unique fingerprint of your hardware. And they used several things like the serial number of your processor and your hard drive and other things, and they somehow boil it down to a unique fingerprint code for your device. And that was used to tell if the same product key was used on another device. And they're still doing that right up through Windows 11. But what's interesting now, whenever, in general, people have always resisted having any kind of unique identifiers of computers because it would make it easy for you to get caught for doing illegal things like BitTorrent, and it would make it easy to target people like political activists and journalists and stuff who wish to connect to something and not have a log kept of exactly who they are. But now this has been used. The Windows 11 Global Device Identifier has been given to the FBI and it helped them apprehend a criminal. So this, as soon as Microsoft invented this fingerprint, which must be about 20 years ago now, the privacy advocates freaked out and said, wait a minute, this is really bad. This could be used to track people down. And apparently that is now true. And law enforcement is using it to track down people. All right. There's a attack called Skill Cloak that lets malicious AI agent skills evade scanners. And what it does is it moves the whole payload into a directory that the scanner skips, like .git, behind a harmless-looking decoder that rebuilds the skill only when the agent runs it. Scanners skip such directories to save time and cut false alarms, which is exactly the blind spot the trick exploits. So this reminds me, there was a time when um, alternate data streams connected to file names were not scanned by antivirus. And of course, the bad guys started putting malware in there. So it sounds like the current scanners to detect malicious AI skills have a similar blind spot here that they're going to have to patch. There's a new attack called TrojPix that leaks data from air-gapped systems. Now, this is something that's been going on for decades. If you have an air-gapped system, like operational technology or something, that's not connected to a network at all, how do you get the data off it? And there are a lot of ways. You can send ultrasound through power surges that affect the transformer coils. You can send radio signals. Uh, you can send light signals that flicker on the screen and so on. What this one does is it tweaks on-screen pixels so that the video cable carrying them radiates a radio signal that can be detected elsewhere. So it's just another example. Even goes all the way back to the Tempest project many decades ago, where they asked how can we really process top secret information on a computer and be sure that nobody is stealing it. And what they found is the only way to do that is to work in basically a SCIF. You have to work in a metal container like a Faraday cage with no windows. So no light can get out and no radio signals can get out. And then I imagine run off battery power so no power signals can get out through your power supply. That's the kind of thing you have to do. Otherwise, everything you do on your computer is emitting information through radio and other means that can, in principle, be picked up by a sufficiently motivated and powerful attacker. All right. And then in the world of AI, Palantir's Karp, an executive there who's sort of famous for saying crazy things, gave a speech and did veer off into the usual madness. But he also said that he thinks that NVIDIA's open model is the solution for, let's see. Well, what he said is something's gone completely wrong. My summary is wrong here, but the point is he said that the charging per token is a ridiculous model, and I'm not quite sure what he wants to do instead. Anyway, it is an interesting case. I think a lot of people say that the tokens we're paying, I got a $20 a month Claude subscription. And they say that's not really paying what Claude costs at all. And the price is going to go up and they'll just have to hire humans again. So we're in the process of that disillusionment on the part of middle managers. Anyway, AI decline, autonomous penetration testing has been all the rage for a year or two, so much so that when we did the collegiate penetration testing contest a few months ago, the organizers said, penetration testing is over. It'll just be done by AI now. We shouldn't be teaching pen testing or competing on pen testing. And the industry representative there said, this is nonsense. We still hire pen testers and we're going to keep hiring human pen testers. What are you talking about? And that industry representative appears to be correct. The number of organizations willing to rely on AI-powered pen testing for their security needs was 29% a year ago, but now it has fallen to 9%. So, and I must say I had the same experience. I asked my Claude-based AI agent to scan my code for vulnerabilities in my online grading product, and it found 5 or 6 important vulnerabilities and helped me to fix them. And then I went and got an AI pen test, which was very burdensome. It spun up something like 50 sub-agents. It used up all my tokens for 5 hours, and then it used up most of my tokens for the next 5-hour block. And at the end, found essentially nothing that mattered. So I was not impressed at all at the efficiency, speed, or success of that pen test. And I think other people have figured this out too. The idea that AI is smart enough to do a real pen test is pretty much bogus, just like all other examples of AI actually replacing a real human worker. Now, I imagine that pen testers, just like everybody else, should be using AI to help them. But you need to have humans in the loop that are intelligent, I think, to do a good job. So it turns out a whole bunch of people are running AI endpoints with no security. Llama ships with no built-in authentication at all. And Light LM is an opt-in. Depending on whether you set a master key, there's also a common placeholder default key, like a default password. So attackers are using a ton of exposed endpoints to use other people's AI systems to process data just to avoid paying for it. So this reminds me of the problem from 3 decades ago when a bunch of people had open mail transfer agents so spammers could use them to send email. Same kind of thing. And this story hit quite a few places as kind of an example of the stupidity of it. There's a county that has 37 data centers that are using up all the power. So they have now asked the schools to conserve electricity by turning off lights and things like that. So people feel like, this is poor priority, that you build all these data centers without enough power to run them. And then you expect things like schools to have to cut power to save. This is happening all over the place. When people put in the AI data centers, they can use up so much power that the power costs rise, and more states and counties and cities are banning it. I heard about a city where the city council approved the data center. It certainly seems like they're just getting bribed to do this. And the residents were so angry, they unincorporated the city. So it became an unincorporated area of the county that no longer had a city council, so they could stop it. That's one drastic solution. Just annihilate the town to invalidate the promises made by the city council. All right, and in politics, Alibaba, okay, there's quite a bit of a scandal here. Claude put a secret tracker, Claude code, to see if you were in China. This is because the Chinese models have been distilling data from the American powerful models. So they send millions of queries to the American model. They use that to find out what the right answer is to things like thinking processes, and they train their model to imitate it. It is an easy way for a weaker model to copy the power of a stronger model. And they don't like this. It's not technically illegal, but Anthropic wants it to be illegal. Everybody's copying their powerful models. And so this means you have to sneak in a whole bunch of queries. They can try to block China, but you can do things like use proxies and change the indications, the identifying information in the requests, like the user agent and such. You can change things to sneak past it. And so what they did was they added secret code to Claude code that would detect if you're coming from China. And if you are, it would change the format of the date. So it was trying hard to be secret and leaking out information so they can tell who's using it from China, which is clearly in order to try to stop China distilling their models. But a independent researcher found this, and everybody freaked out, saying, if you're putting sneaky surveillance software in Claude code, that violates your open, privacy-based, ethics-based public persona. And they took it out after the complaint. Um, and so anyway, that's what happened. And in response, China has now banned employees from using Claude Code, saying Claude Code is a security risk because it's spying on us. And it's an interesting position to take. They're not supposed to be using Claude Code anyway, and they are using Claude Code in order to steal American technology, which is explicitly something the Chinese government approves of and wants people to do. So anyway, uh, this sounds like a nonsense to me. Anyway, but it's part of the American-China battle over technology, which is always full of a lot of nonsense on both sides. All right, Microsoft is trying to get rid of their employees, and they've offered voluntary retirement for the first time. And a lot of people have retired. The person I saw that first pointed this out to me on Mastodon said, you should get off Azure. They're firing all the experienced developers. Their product is going to go downhill. That may be true. I think just like every other company, they're going through a wave of layoffs, which is a foolish, short-sighted move just to pump up one quarter's profit for a middle manager. And what they typically find is they just have to rehire people quickly after that. Uh, all right. One thing that's interesting about this one is in order to be eligible for the voluntary retirement, your years of employment and age have to add up to 70 or higher. So that's an interesting way to look at it. It does mean that seniority at the company counts against you. Anyway, this is a persistent problem in tech. You want to somehow push out the old people who are generally perceived as being out of date and insufficiently energetic and fill the place with young people who are cheaper and presumably more energetic and more up to date with modern technology. This may be true. It's also almost certainly illegal, age discrimination. It's hard to say. All right. So researchers asked an AI to impersonate 112 public figures. And what they found was the AI impersonators were more authentic, coherent, and relevant than real politicians. And people say this means it's going to fool people. Of course, I wonder if it would. I mean, I guess I'm cynical, but my statement is if a politician actually answers a question and makes sense, then they must be an AI fake. As far as I can tell, I've listened to a lot of politics. And the only people I ever hear that actually answer questions are Bernie and possibly AOC, although I don't see much of AOC lately. The amazing thing, you listen to Bernie, you ask him a question, he actually answers the question. Everybody else follows a rule I heard decades ago. They ignore the question and just repeat their talking point to stay on message. Bernie's the only one where you have a conversation like you would with an actual authentic human that wants to help you discover the truth. You ask a question, he gives you an actual response to the question. Anyway, all right. So Karen Reed has a lawsuit in Massachusetts, and it turns out these two police officers were incredibly racist, and they had text messages that have been exposed showing it. This guy said, "Oh, you don't have to hurry on that call. Take your time. I found out that a N-word black person was involved, so I wouldn't rush. Just let them die." And he has other ones similarly. It should be Punch an N-word day in Canton today out of retribution. Any shine you see, blasted in the face. So outrageously racist, which I must say is no surprise now that the Republican Party has gone full Nazi. And there have been tons of chats just like this leaking out of the Young Republicans and many other groups. Apparently, half of America is still this racist. And a lot of us liberals were in a dream world imagining that this had declined. Obviously, it is still extremely big in American culture, outrageous racism against Black people and other groups like Hispanics and Chinese people. It's a shame. I had a European friend a while ago say, yeah, you're living in a fantasy land. Now you realize that half of the people around you would gladly kill the other half. And that's apparently the way it's always been everywhere. And we had this illusion that America was this bastion of tolerance where that was not true. And Trump has revealed that it is true. The other people were just sort of stifling themselves and not saying what they really felt like because they felt it would be punished if they actually told the truth. Now that they feel like they can say what they mean, this is what they mean. Outrageous, revolting racism. I hoped education would help. If it has helped, it hasn't helped enough. All right, and the last one here is there's a prompt injection attack where what the attacker does is use search engine optimization to target AI agents searching for a Python library called Request Secure V2. Then they go to that website, and in the website, there are indirect prompts instructing the visiting agent to make a payment over cryptocurrency as part of the routine process of acquiring an API key. And this is the issue with AI agents and in general agentic browsers. Since agentic browsers can do things on your behalf, you can trick it into doing things like making purchases, sending information to a third party, and so on. And this is the problem ever since they first started coming out about 6 months ago. If you make it so it has to ask permission for everything, then it's almost useless. If you give it the ability to do things, then you're trusting an extremely stupid AI to do things that matter, like buy things, make money, and send your secrets around. And that conundrum is one nobody has solved yet because of the fundamental flaw with AI agents in that they do not understand the context of data coming in, which I'm amazed. It seems like I say this every week. How can nobody have paid any attention to this and still not fixed it? There must be some way to categorize the data into data that came from the administrator, which must be obeyed, and data which came from the user, which is optional to obey. That's a fundamental security barrier present in every product except large language models. And I haven't heard of anybody making any progress to fix that yet. Okay. Anyway, that's all I have for this one. There'll be another one on Friday.